Welcome to the Evolving Man podcast. My name is Alan DeMonso, and I'm the founder of The Awakened Man and your host today. You know, as we continue 2021's theme of reclaim, retool, and respond, we look into Q2's quarterly theme of ignition, igniting your passion, your purpose, and your power. And it's at this time that we take a look really into our passions and how they can overtake our lives in unhealthy ways. So today's episode is about recovery and beyond. But before we get into that, I just want to encourage you to join our brotherhood, the Band of Brothers. This is our community of strong, resilient men, where each man is dedicated to his growth and the growth of his brothers. We meet monthly, where we go in depth with the monthly theme. You get exercises to lock in the lessons learned, and there's a roundtable portion where you get to opportunity to share of what's going on in your life. And if you're really interested in raising the level that you show up in your life, then I encourage you to take an opportunity and participate in our mentoring program called the Hero's Journey or the Hero's Quest. It's a 90-day program guaranteed to improve at least one facet of your life. And where can you find all this information? Well, you can find it at the Awakened Man Training Academy at members, that's plural, members.theawakenedman.com or .net, I should say. I look forward to seeing you in the brotherhood. Let's get on with today's podcast.
The average man today is sleepwalking through life. Many never reaching their true potential, let alone ever crossing the finish line to living a purposeful life. Luckily, throughout history, there exists a few good men we can look to for guidance. Strong, confident, driven. Men who weren't afraid to face the greatest tyrant they've ever known, their minds. Forged in the fire of their shadows, these men knew who they were at their core. Solid in their convictions, owners of their reality, men of action, strength, and character. Masters of their destiny. Today's man is no different. The hunger still exists, albeit buried amidst his cluttered mind, misguided beliefs, and values that no longer serve them or the world. There's never been a better time than today for men to stand up and claim their stake. It's time to reconnect to your life purpose, evolving into husbands and fathers our wives and children deserve, becoming masters of our life and the leaders of our homes and community. Ever evolving, today's man is assured he is aligned for greatness. Welcome to the movement. Stay strong, my brother.
Welcome, everyone, to the Evolving Man podcast. I'm the founder of The Awakened Man and your host, Alan DeMonso. Do you or someone you love struggle with addiction? How have they been? Have you been able to cope with this during the 2020 pandemic? Today, we're going to address the causes, impacts, and resources you need to recover from addiction, regardless of whether you are the addict or you're supporting an addict. Today's guest is Kendall Hines. He's the founder and creator of Recovery and Beyond. Kendall is a recovered fentanyl addict who's been 5 years sober and which has led him to running a construction company and very soon to be father. So Kendall's journey is one that I'm sure is going to inspire and give hope for those of us struggling with addiction in our lives. And as you know, folks, I like to ask a couple of enrolling questions to get us thinking about the topic that we're going to talk about today. So the first question I'd like you to consider is, has addiction touched your life in some way? And if you could learn how to support someone with addiction or manage your own addiction, would that be something of interest to you? So if you said yes to either of these, then I think this podcast is going to be an eye-opener for you. Remember, if you like what you hear, hit subscribe or hit the like button. The more folks that get access to the content, the better. So welcome, Kendall, to the podcast today. Really great to have you here. How's it going?
Not too bad. Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Right on. So, I think the best place to start would be to have an opportunity for you to tell your story about, what your life journey was like and what's led you to this point. So tell us what was going on for you.
Yeah, well, it's been quite the journey. I hope we have enough time to go through it. Yeah, for me, it's interesting because obviously the journey's evolved. Things that I thought once in my mind prior, like my childhood, relationship with my parents are certainly different now. And I look at them at a different light now and have a better understanding of them, that relationship that I had growing up as a child. My mother and I struggled quite a bit from the early years and on into teenage years. So for me growing up, I mean, now I have a better understanding of my mom, and that at the time she was doing her best. She had no ill intention towards us as kids. But whatever she grew up in her childhood carried on to how she was as a mother. And for me, now that I'm through a lot of demons, hurts, and pains, I come to realize a different side of the story. Right. But growing up as a kid, for me, I had a lot of struggles with my relationship with my mom. My father, on the other hand, he was, Mr. Hippie-go-lucky, right? So I had a different relationship with him. Him and I had the love of music together. So that brought us together. On the weekends, we'd be playing drums together and enjoying those moments. My mom and I didn't have much of a connection. For me, growing up as a kid, she was quite, I guess the word to use is militant, right? She liked things done a certain way. And it's funny because now being an adult, I like things done a certain way, how that's carried on, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I have a better understanding of where she was coming from. But yeah, we had quite struggles, right? At the age of almost 17, I had run away from home. We were living out in LaSalle, Manitoba at that age for me. I ended up taking off down LaSalle Highway, no jacket, middle of winter, running away from home. And that was it for me. I had enough. Enough was enough. I was in high school at the time, obviously. Graduated from high school, so I continued going. But at the time, I had moved in with the girlfriend's parents at the time, and they took me in. So I stayed there for a couple of years and graduated and carried on. And yeah, so my relationship with my mother at that point, I think it was a good 10 to 12 years that we didn't really have a relationship.
Wow. So
my whole 20s, going into my 30s, early 30s, we didn't have that relationship. Life progressed. At the time, I was a part of a mega church, one of the bigger churches in Winnipeg here. So I had gone to the high school. So religion, God, all that kind of stuff was a big part of my teenage years. Yeah. And, it had its good times, its bad times. I was a part of the praise and worship team. I was a drummer there for probably 14 years.
Wow.
So it was a big part of my growth, and it was a good thing because at the time I didn't have much purpose, right? As a young man that took off from home, I really didn't have much purpose, but I had great supports, the girlfriend's parents, church, lots of great friends. So partying for me wasn't a thing when I was in my teens or even my early 20s, very early 20s.
Right. So was the church part of your first home's process as well as moving in with your girlfriend, or was it more after the fact?
No, it was during. Yeah,
Fair
I think
enough.
I started attending when my mom and dad actually started us going into church.
Yeah,
probably around the age of 12. So it was something that I carried on in my teenage years. My parents eventually did get a divorce. Obviously, the church doesn't condone that, so they ended up leaving church. It was just me attending that church at the time.
right.
And yeah, not to say too much bad about church. I mean, I learned a lot of great skills. Right now, I don't attend. I have a different belief. I've had the opportunity to find my own belief instead of being told what to believe in. And everything evolves, right? So who knows what the future holds, as you carry on, but your belief has to be your belief.
Absolutely.
I believe. But yeah, so carrying on, so within the church, you're told to marry, or you're not told, but it's encouraged to marry quickly, that kind of stuff. So at the age of 22, I had gotten married, right? And the ex-wife at the time, or the wife at the time, she's my ex, she was 21. So we were extremely young, had no life experience. It was her first relationship. So it was very difficult. And to make a long story short, I had come home one day, 5 months into being married, and everything was gone.
Wow.
all the furniture, everything. All I was left was my clothes and a mattress and a note saying she made a mistake. And I haven't heard from her since. So, it took about a decade to get over that, essentially.
I was just going to say, like, that must have been, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that just must have been devastating, because it's even seeing you tell the story right now, it still feels like a blindside, like no clue that this was coming.
No. And I mean, in church, you're taught that divorce is a sin.
Yeah.
So for someone that's so involved in God and the church to actually walk away from you, that's quite a rejection. And that's the way I looked at it, right?
For
like
sure.
She's obviously willing to go to hell.
Yeah.
And divorce me, so to speak, but obviously she has a side of the story. I've never been able to reconciliate or to close that chapter, but I had to let it go, and I had to come to the understanding that there's two sides to a story, right? So as much as I want to sit there and I don't know, feel rejection, something happened on her end as well.
Yep, absolutely.
I know that now. Obviously, during my 20s, carrying on, man, I went into a party phase, for a lack of a term. It was drinking constantly, and so the whole drumming section of my purpose, like I was a part of this mega church playing drum. It brought a lot of purpose to me, right? The people around me are amazed. Oh, they look up to you. It creates this sense of purpose, and you feel like you're a somebody. And when that divorce happened, I got asked to step down after many, many years of being a part of a church that made me feel home, right?
Yeah.
So those are the three things that kind of propelled me into destruction, right? It was the relationship with my mother, number one. Something that should be solid in your life wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, God, right? Something that should be solid in your life fell apart for me.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, my wife at the time, that ended. And those three things just blew up my world, because I didn't know what was what anymore.
Yeah.
And
so how was your father? Like, how was your father's presence through all of this as well? Like, you spoke a lot about your mom, but you get a sense of how was your dad there to support you and help you through this?
He's always there. He's easygoing, right?
Right.
You're right. He goes which any way the wind blows, which is fine. We have a great relationship, my father and I, and that's always been stable. So I haven't had much anger or anything towards my dad other than love and acceptance. But with my mother, I had to work on that.
Sure.
So after everything collapsed, all those three items and that I told you about, I lost a lot of friends, because at this church that I attended, you're within a bubble.
Yeah.
Right.
Really tight community, right?
Really tight community. And when something like a divorce or anything that they consider a sin occurs, people kind of step back from you because they feel like they're going to catch the virus or the disease. And they associate that with your relationship with God, that, he doesn't have a good relationship with God because bad things are happening to him. Right. So a lot of people step back. And so I was left in a world that I've never been a part of before. I was always a part of the church. And now I'm in the real world, and I know nothing about it.
Crazy.
Right. Which in return, turned into me finding a group of people that accepted me for who I was, which in return turned into drinking and partying. And it spiraled after that,
Yeah. Yeah. So now you're at that point, right? You're 22, you said, right? So pretty much 22 years you've had an okay, home life. And then you get a chance there at 17, you leave and now you're still part of this big mega church, but really you've been sheltered. You haven't had an opportunity to really experience anything. Now you're out on your own and completely, left alone. The church has left you. Your wife's left you, and your sounds like your home life, your family, parent life wasn't as strong as it needed to be to support you. So what happened next? Now you're at this critical, fork in the road for you. What was going on then?
Yeah. So having your life kind of driven for you, so to speak. And then all of a sudden now it's in your control. It's in your hands. I had no idea what to do. Right. So life kind of comes at you and you don't know how to react to it. So you just go with whatever happens. So at the time, I was a part of this group of guys, and they felt like home and life and love, you know, because they accepted me for me. And we just partied. I mean, I worked, you know, I did very well. But for many, many years, it was just trying to find some sort of purpose again. And I found purpose within these relationships, these new relationships I developed, which in return took me down a road I wish I never went down, but I'm glad I did because I learned a lot from it.
Sure.
So the 20s was literally drinking, experimenting with drugs, you know, everything from ecstasy, marijuana, mushrooms, cocaine. I mean, the list goes on and on. And then, because you're opening yourself to all these drugs, all of a sudden opiates kind of came to the table. And sometimes addicts, we talk about like drug of choice.
Yep. Some
drugs, I don't know, just do something for somebody and they react differently and it catches them. And opiates caught me. And it was the feeling of this euphoric feeling that this is the way life should have always felt like.
Wow.
And it grabbed me. So it was a good 3 or 4 years on Percocets, Oxys. The government had kind of cracked down on doctors, so to speak, and who can prescribe and all that kind of stuff. And it got difficult to come across a lot of these opiates. And then fentanyl hit the scene. So naturally, that's where I progressed.
Sure.
It was 3 years of using heavily fentanyl.
Wow. And to come up through and to have been able to come through it as well. Like that's incredible, man. There's so many stories of people that, you know, that are hooked on fentanyl and they don't make it, right? They just don't make it. And so, you know, it kind of reminds me of listening to tell your story, kind of reminds me of hearing about that, you know, chasing that first high.
Yeah.
And trying to get back to that place and never quite ever getting there. Yeah. And so what did you do? Like, what was, what were some of the struggles as an addict that you had to deal with in managing your addiction?
Well, first of all, I never thought I'd ever turn into a drug addict, even though I was using drugs, right?
Sure.
It was never something that crossed my mind. And
I got it under control, right?
Yeah. And it was never something that all of a sudden you came up to the cliff where now you make one more step, you're going to fall into addiction. You don't see that coming.
Right.
All of a sudden, you're in control, and then just like that, you're no longer in control. Right. And it's not like I woke up one day and I'm like, oh, I'm going to be an addict today. That's not something that we can see coming.
Absolutely not. You know, it's interesting you say that because it's so true in our lives, right? I don't think anybody wakes up to say, oh, I think today's a good day to screw up my life. No. And go about doing that. But it's the things that, when we're not aware and what's happening in the bad behaviors and that become repetitive, then really put us in a vulnerable spot. So how was
it was a long road I went down.
Yeah.
But when you start that path, you can't see the end of it.
Yeah.
Right. And all of a sudden you're in the middle of it. You got used to it. You're not really nervous about it. And then once you get to the end, you realize, oh man, I should not have started that path.
Yeah. And how are the other relationships in your life going on right now? Like, are you speaking to your father during this? Are you still reaching out with your mom? Like you said, I know everybody had kind of shunned you at one point, but now you're in the addiction. You're in the problem. What's that? What's the circle of friendship and family like now for you?
So from age 22, right after the divorce. And so 8 years until I was about 30. Again, didn't have a relationship with my mom. I had a relationship with my father, but it was when it worked for me, right? When I needed something. Other than that, it was this group of guys that I just continually hung out with. And that was my new family for the 8 years. But the relationship with my father was strenuous because obviously, I would go to him when I needed money. I would go to him when I needed to feel safe again. So it was a one-sided relationship. And for him, he had no idea what to do, what was happening, how to react, where to go, what to say. I can only imagine what he had to deal with.
Right. And so how do you feel that his presence though throughout your whole ordeal, did it help or hinder you on your road to recovery, thinking back on it today?
Yeah, it didn't help.
Interesting.
Didn't
How
help.
so?
Well, the fact that, I'd go say my lies, right, to get what I needed. And he wants to believe it, right? He doesn't want to believe his son's lying to him or using him. So, and it's not his fault. He just didn't know what to do, right? So giving me money, he's a part of the problem so that I can purchase the drug to keep going. But I feel for him because he didn't know what to do, right?
Yeah.
Of course, he told me many times he wished he could just hit me over the head and, all of a sudden everything's perfect. But it's not that simple. If it was that simple, we wouldn't have rehab or we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and as you know, having being a father of an addict, it is a tough spot to be in. So I ask you that in all that question, all earnest, as fathers, we're trying to figure out how to best support our son or our daughter who is deep in the problem, and what does that look like? And it's great to hear you, be so honest about, the things that we think are helping and really just perpetuating the issue for you.
It's difficult because obviously you and your son, I know you know what to do in the back of your mind, but it's the emotions that are stopping you from doing what you know you need to do.
Yeah.
It's easy for me to sit here and say, listen, this is what you need to do for your son. But man, it's completely different when it's emotions. My dad, I know deep down inside, my dad should have cut me off years ago.
Right.
But that's not easy.
Yeah. But at some point now you've found the inner strength to say enough was enough. Right. So when you think back now, what was your greatest hurdle that you really needed to overcome to finally make that change in your life and start your path on recovery? What do you think needed to change?
Well, first of all, I always had hope, like when I was deep in the problem, and there comes a point in a drug user's career, as they say, their drug career, that they realize they're no longer in control, right? And so I always had hope that something's going to happen that is going to break me free of the vicious cycle, right?
Right.
The hope was always there. Didn't mean that the opportunities were happening for me all the time. I hate to say luck. I hate to say the stars aligned, but hope was always in the back of my mind. And then once the stars did align, there was an opportunity that came up. It was up to me to go through that door.
Interesting.
Because we do have these opportunities, whether it's go to rehab, whether it's, your family finally intervenes and sends you to detox. You still have to take that step. And it's not easy. But for me, the biggest hurdle was admitting to myself I had that problem. Right. I knew I had the problem, but it's admitting it out loud.
Yeah.
Right. How difficult it is to wake up and have to use just to start your day. How scary it is, but you'll hide it from yourself as long as you can because you're protecting yourself, because it's a very scary spot to be in.
Fair enough. It's kind of like the devil. It's the old adage of knowing the devil you do know versus the one you don't. Yep. And it can be, I can totally empathize with what you were in and obviously where my son must be at this point in time. But, you're mentioning there about finally having to admit, and I know we're going to get into your program, your Recovery and Beyond program. And I know it's not really a 12-step program, but it does fall on the very first step of, admitting that you're powerless over the addiction. So I think it's important. The other thing I hear a lot about, though, from doing some research on addiction and that there was lots of shame for addicts. And so I'm wondering if you could just spend a little bit of time talking about the shame around that. And what does that really mean from an addict's perspective?
Yeah. So obviously that was a huge hurdle for myself, especially being a church kid, right? I I guess to me, it mattered what people thought about me. Mm-hmm. So that being shameful of my actions, of the situation I was in, the stigma around addiction prevented me from being honest to other people and for reaching out to get help.
Wow.
And it's interesting because you'll stay in this destructive, vicious circle that's painful and because you're afraid of letting go of that because of the unknown. Like the unknown seems to be a lot more fearful than staying in this destructive, painful pattern. It's very bizarre. It's like a backwards way of thinking.
So do you feel like I'm kind of getting this thought came into my mind as I'm wondering, was it a wrestling match between feeling that will I be accepted?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Being accepted that now, I'm going through this program, I'm getting myself getting into recovery, but will I be accepted? And
yeah. I mean, it's a weird thing, the whole rejection, the fear of rejection, right?
Yeah.
And I wish I could tell other addicts, and it's hard to say it to them until they experience it. But when I finally surrendered and let go of the stigma, of the shame, of the guilt, and just finally shed it and let it go, all of a sudden life started to organically happen and everything started to come back. It's a freedom, right? But it's like the battle's up there.
Yeah, absolutely.
As much as there's resources out there and there's fantastic resources, this is the major battle right here that's preventing a lot of people from making changes in their life.
Absolutely. That's so interesting that you use that term to surrender. And I think for lots of us and I'll say as the father side that I need to also surrender and just trust in whatever my belief is in a higher power, that things will be looked after and to do that, but to truly surrender. And I think that's a great insight that you just provided. So let's talk a little bit about you started Recovery and Beyond as a support service, but how did it come about? Tell us about what your program is and how it all works.
Okay. Can I interlude into it, talk about rehab quickly? It'll help me get in.
Absolutely.
Okay. So anyways, to make a long story short about the addiction side of things, I was living with my girlfriend at the time when I was nearing the end. So I had lost everything, like finances. I had no finances. I wasn't paying my vehicle insurance, wasn't paying any of my bills. I was pawning everything I owned and trying to hide it from the girlfriend. And eventually it catches up to you. So it got to a point where she started realizing something was up. And then she found a fentanyl pill. And then I told her, I'll stop. It's no big deal. Obviously, I couldn't. So it ended up turning into me. I was driving to a dealer's house and I ended up getting to an accident, hit a curb as well. Some people were reporting my driving. And then when I got home, there were cops waiting for me. So they had actually, I didn't get arrested, thankfully. But they had cuffed me, took me to the back of the car, took me to Grace Hospital. They were doing a welfare check as well. Someone had called in. So we were at the hospital, and at that point, the cops had told me, "Oh, you're gonna be looked after. Everything's gonna be good." And so at that point, I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, this vicious cycle is finally gonna break."
Right.
So as I'm sitting in the hospital for 4 or 5 hours, I finally see a doctor, and of course, I'm just a drug addict, right? So they gave me some sleeping medication, some Valium to help with the withdrawals, and sent me on my way. But as I'm leaving the hospital, obviously someone had to pick me up, and it was my mom. Haven't talked to her in many years, haven't really seen her, and she was there. She took me to her house. I don't remember the last 2 days after that. I was going through withdrawals. And then I woke up in a bed in my mom's home, and there was a gentleman that took me to detox. So the 11-day stay at Mainstay. So I did that program for 11 days, detoxed, and I had lost 19 pounds in 11 days. Like it was pretty rough, dangerous. Didn't sleep for my first 4 days there. Didn't eat at all my entire time there. And then after that, I got shipped to AFM for their 28-day residential program, completed that program. And that was August of 2016. So getting into Recovery and Beyond, the support group. When I was in AFM, their number one support groups that they push on you are AA, 12-step, which is completely fine. Yeah. I understand that. It's been a big part of the recovery work for many years. It's worked for a lot of people. For some reason, I'm the guy that goes in there that it didn't work for. Right? Yeah. And there's no other alternative. And they weren't showing me any other alternatives. Carly's sister, so the girlfriend at the time that had kicked me out, we're now married. She's now my wife, and her sister works at one of the recovery centers. So she knew the struggle I was having with the 12-step program. So she had found a group that's a non-12-step program. At the time, it was the only one in Winnipeg. And I went and checked it out, and it was the best thing that I ever discovered during my early recovery, because it aligned with my beliefs.
Right.
So
on.
Easy for me to digest and easy for me to be a part of it because I believed in it.
Right.
Instead of going to a recovery group that is forcing you to do it their way or the highway, and if it's not working for you, they just reject you. So I did that for 3.5 years, that recovery group.
Excellent. Good to hear. Yeah, it's so true, right? Each of us has our own path in life. And so it's beautiful that you were able to find something that that resonated with you, right? Because not everyone, while 12-step programs do work for a lot of people, there are a lot that it doesn't, because of whatever reason, whether the belief in God piece or a higher power or some part of the program just doesn't seem to work.
And you nailed it there. Because of my experience with church,
there we go.
The higher power thing was only making me more upset, and I couldn't focus on becoming better because I was stuck on that. Yeah. As well as it felt like a big Bible study. Yeah. Like there's something about it that just didn't jive with me. And people are getting upset at me, telling me that you're not serious about your recovery if you're not going to do the 12 steps. And I couldn't get past it. But everyone kept saying, you're not serious about your recovery. They weren't saying, hey, let's find something else.
Wow.
That works for you.
There you go. So now you have this, so you started your own program. So obviously the one that you attended, you felt there was great value, but there was something a little bit more that you wanted to add. So tell us a little bit about how what twist you put onto the Recovery and Beyond group that you run, and how that works with other programs as well as the other one you were mentioning earlier.
Yeah. So the other one that I was originally going to, we had a falling out. Half the group split. I mean, come on, we're just a bunch of people getting together in a room. At some point, there's going to be something that happens. We're all human. So we had decided we're going to get together and start our own group. We liked, 80% of what that group was doing, but we're going to put our own twist on it, as you said. So again, we are not 12-step. We don't talk about higher power. But we also encourage people in these groups to find the resources that work for them. We don't say our way or the highway.
Right.
You have to be a part of our group. And if you're not a part of our group, then you're not serious in recovery. Right. Even on our website, we have a resource page that has even AA listed. We have all the support groups. Because if what we're doing isn't working for you, please go check out another group. We'll even tell you where the address is. We'll tell you what time it's at, which is why we have the resource on our page.
Sure.
We see the value in having the recovery world working together, not separate.
Right. Well, that's a great point you make, because that's a big shift in what your life experience was, where there was a lot of exclusivity within these groups. And so you're opening it up, saying, hey man, like we may have we're open to everything, and this might work for you and it might not, and that's okay. Whereas you're at least allowing people to explore and find their recovery journey for what makes sense for them. So I think that's so powerful.
When I talk to guys about our kind of belief system, I like to think about it as owning or versus renting. When you rent an apartment, you don't really, you pay your rent, but you don't own it. So you're not taking care of it like you would if you owned it, right? It's a completely different. So we always say, own your recovery. find what works for you and own it. Right.
Nice.
You don't want to go along. It's nice to take advice from people that have been in the recovery world and they're doing well, but take what works for you and leave the rest.
Right on.
Don't try to mimic what one person's doing, because 90% of the time you got to find what works for you.
Absolutely. So you've been on this journey for a while now, and I'm just wondering, is there a like a demographic, or is there a specific type of person that gets that is affected by addiction? Have you seen that, or is it more wide open?
Yeah, it is wide open. I mean, I do see a lot of younger people. I'm not sure if that's just because we're a younger group. But the range of age is all over the place as well. I mean, we got fathers, we got mothers, we got nurses, we got professionals, we got students, we have some homeless people as well, right?
Sure.
So it's a wide range of people that are attending these groups. And what I wanted to say to your question was, addiction doesn't discriminate.
There we go.
Yeah, it can happen to anyone. I mean, it happened to me. I come to realize I did have a good childhood, right?
Yeah, even though I didn't feel it at the time, right?
Right.
Fair
but
enough.
Now, after redeveloping my relationship with my mother, we have a great relationship now. We talk, we visit each other. It's complete night and day difference. But I've only realized it now. I had a good childhood.
Right on. And so with this pandemic now, we've been more than 15 months or so into this pandemic. Have you seen an increase in the need for recovery programs like yours, or have things kind of flatlined? Like what are you seeing on your end of it?
That's a loaded question.
All right.
It's a good question though. I'd like to believe there is more people that are in need. The problem is, because we're supposed to not associate with each other, we're supposed to stay away from one another. It's made it difficult to reach out, or for an addict to reach out for a recovery group. We do have Zoom, which is fantastic. The other problem as well is there's a bunch of free money going around. Yeah. Which is, there's people that needed it, of course, but you're always going to have the other side that are going to abuse it, right?
For sure.
And so I know a number of drug addicts that are using that free money, the CERB. I say free money, but CERB, yep, the assistance. And it's only they're staying stuck where they're at because they're being provided money, to keep going.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And it's a fair assessment, right? There's no harm, no foul in mentioning that, because that's truly what's going on. And as you said earlier, at some point in that addiction phase, you absolutely have nothing. So while Zoom's a great tool, you probably don't have the phone, you don't have a computer, you don't have the access to it. And with the lockdowns, that it'll be difficult for these folks that are looking for help to find it, right? So it's a fair statement, right?
Someone also totally mentioned to me the term human connection.
Yeah.
So we've lost that human connection, right?
Yeah.
So it was even tough for me when we went onto Zoom to be encouraged to attend meetings. I lost the excitement of it. Yeah.
No, I hear you. So let's go back. I want to backpedal just a little bit and go back to your program, Recovery and Beyond. So how is it different than, maybe some more specifics on how it's different than other 12-step programs?
Yeah. So we don't do sponsors. So we don't have a sponsors program, right? We don't encourage that. We believe in creating a life where our drug addiction no longer serves a purpose. So we also don't, when we introduce ourselves, we don't encourage people or tell them they have to say you're an addict or you're an alcoholic. Just give us your name. Like, we really believe in the power of your mind and thought life and how you speak about yourself. It's not hippy dippy if people are thinking that, but I really think the mind is powerful, because with our group, because we don't talk about the higher power. We encourage finding your inner strength. So we're not looking on the outside anymore.
Nice.
We want to start from the inside, because when I was in the addiction, what I was doing was finding things on the outside to cover up the pain on the inside.
Right on.
Right. So when it comes to wanting to recover, you got to really search your soul. You got to find out who you are and heal from the inside out. Not saying it doesn't work to do the higher power thing. All sorts of programs work, but what are you willing to make work is the question you need to ask.
Absolutely. Well, it's so great. It's so great to hear you say that, because, some of the work that I do with in men's work is we always talk about the thoughts lead to words, lead to our actions, lead to our behaviors, leads to our character, right? And ultimately resides in our destiny. And so it all starts with the power of our thoughts. So I'm glad to hear you say that. And the other thing I try to talk a lot about is about that our journey of self-discovery, all the doors open inwards. So,
Absolutely.
right, they all open inwards. And so that's where it is. And so I think it's great work that you're doing and pulling people into that type of a self-discovery, as opposed to looking for something outside of them that either validates their existence or validates some part of their life. And I think that is so powerful. I just want to shift a little bit here and talk and ask you a question about how the pain of change versus the pain of staying in the problem really affects addicts and that vicious cycle you were mentioning earlier. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite fearful. I mean, you get into a pattern that you recognize, a pattern that you know, that turns into a comfortable pattern, which is odd. So when you have to make these tough changes, like the void, I like to call them the dark voids. Like, to me, that's where change really happens, is in these dark places, these dark voids where you have to let go of one thing and grab onto another. And you're just in a dark void in between grabbing onto the two things. And it's in those voids you can actually change, but it's those voids that are the scariest, right?
Yeah.
So you hang on to that one thing, that one vicious cycle, because you know it's familiar, even though it's destructive, it's painful, it's destroying you. So you'll just hold on to it. You'll also try to grab onto the other thing, but you're not letting go of that one thing you're trying to let go of. And so you can never fully change until you surrender.
Right.
Right. And then once you surrender, yes, it's scary as hell.
Yeah.
It's super scary. When I got out of rehab and I had no job, I had my truck repossessed, I had debts, I was living in my mom's basement, I was on EIA getting $90 a month. My girlfriend had kicked me out. I had nothing. But once I was okay with having nothing, I surrendered to it and I stopped grabbing onto that old life. Then I was able to organically create a new life for myself.
Oh, outstanding. So that's truly when you decided that you needed to own your life, as you were saying earlier, right?
Yeah.
And start walking the path.
Yeah, I mean, this is another thing, like, the whole yin and yang, good and bad.
Yeah.
My whole life I was taught good and bad are separate, right? You have God, he's the God of good. You have the devil, he's the God of bad.
Yeah.
There's always this battle, right? And for me, I came to the conclusion that regardless if there's a God or not, whoever created the world or anything like that, good and bad was created by this universe. And one has to exist for the other to exist. If everything was always good, you wouldn't know it was good.
That's right.
So once I came to that conclusion, it was so easy for me to sit in the bad for a while. Just to sit in it, get through it instead of trying to fight it, push it away. And I don't know if that makes any sense, but
yeah, man, that makes total sense. You're really sitting in there and embracing the darkness. Yeah. What you're saying, right? And I would totally agree with that. That, without, really darkness is the absence of light. And so you're in that space. And for you to acknowledge that, like you said, it was really that pivoting point to make change in your life. That's incredibly powerful. And I'm wanting to reiterate it because I'm hoping our listeners get it, really understand the mindset shift that you went through in really making the recovery work. Because now, as I said in the opening notes, they're 5 years sober plus, and you've got a construction company, right? So talk a little bit about what you do for a living now. Yeah.
When I got out of rehab, and it kind of tied into my experience of birthing into a new person. I had the chance and opportunity to start house flipping. And
Nice.
to be honest with you, I had $5 in my pocket. I had no money. It's just some connections and relationships I had kind of evolved because they're seeing change in me. And like I said, organically, life was starting to form for me. So I took a chance. Obviously, it took me 7 months to flip my first house. I was doing work during the day and then going at night and working on this house. So yeah, it took me 7 months. And the funny thing, it was a crack house that I ended up buying.
Wow.
And I ended up after 7 months turning it into what we call now the dollhouse. So it went from the shittiest house in the on the block, and now became a dollhouse, one that's desirable, that people want to live in. And that whole transformation over 7 months got to me mentally, because for me, that was kind of my story, that entire house. You know, I was drugged out. I was living a life that nobody wanted to be a part of or wish anyone could be a part of. And now people want to be around me. And now I have a life that I'm proud of.
Outstanding.
So, yeah, it was something. It was something cool. So yeah, I've been flipping houses ever since. I do a little bit of contracting work on the side in between projects, but I love the transformation of taking something run down and undesirable and making it desirable.
Outstanding. That's great. Well, this has been outstanding information that you provided today. You're truly a gift for those that are in need. It's an alternative program. It's very powerful for the work that you're doing, because it gives people an opportunity to feel included, where in other programs they might not. So if our listeners wanted to get a chance to reach out to you, how would they do that?
Yeah, you can check us out on Facebook, Recovery and Beyond. You can also Google us, Recovery and Beyond. Oh man, I got to look up our website. I think it's recovery-beyond.ca is our website.
Cool.
So we have our contact information on there. You can reach out to us. My phone number is personally on the website. So if you want to call me, if you have any questions, I like the human connection. So
yeah,
I'm always around. Our meetings are Tuesdays at Earl Grey Center. Right now it's on Zoom, just so you're aware, but Earl Grey Community Center is our normal Tuesday at 7 to 8. And then we're at Red Road Lodge on Main Street. And that is, again, from 7 to 8. But currently, we're just Zoom at the moment until the restrictions are lifted.
And on Red Road Lodge, is that another day of the week or?
Saturday,
7 to 8.
Yeah.
Right on. Excellent. Well, I'll put all this information in the show notes as well, so folks can get an opportunity to reach out to you. Kendall, I just want to say thank you so much for spending time today, telling us your story of hope and redemption, really, of what can happen in our lives, that when it seems its darkest moments, that if we have the right mindset and a little bit of luck and a lot of sweat equity, we can turn our lives around. So you've done an amazing job today. I just want to thank you so much for being here.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Right on. I think it's important that our takeaway for today's topic of recovery and beyond is that all of us will have an opportunity in our lives where we may find that we're in the darkness, the dark night of the soul, so to speak. And it's when you find community that helps you bring yourself out of that place, having the right mindset, having the right support systems in place. All of us will have our own path towards our recovery or our life journey. And it's important that we surround ourselves with people that can help us achieve that. And so again, I encourage you to look at the Awakened Man as one of those avenues to help you on your life journey, either through our Band of Brothers mastermind group or through a mentorship program with the Hero's Quest. With that being said, thank you so much for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the Evolving Man podcast. Have a great day, my brothers. Aho.
Thank you for listening to the Evolving Man podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the brotherhood that is the Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net and start forging a new destiny today.